This is Dr. Bob's Professor blog, number 2. My worst PhD nightmare. A number of years ago, while I was working on my doctorate, the thought crossed my mind often, or more succinctly, the question crossed my mind: who will hire me and what will they have me do? It occurred to me often that my experience in the past as an engineer told me that no one of my previous employers would have the first clue how to use me in the most effective manner. The only person who could employ me was someone else with a Ph.D. who knew or had some semblance of understanding of what I can do. I had applied for many teaching jobs and was never hired except for jobs that were temporary, except as an adjunct or a visiting professor. One of my advisors, a professor, a friend, and collaborator on the research we did together, told me that no university would ever hire me as a professor because of my age. I earned my doctorate at the age of 57. But this admission surprised me, coming from a professor who was high up in the administration and one of the people who was heavily involved in hiring new young professors. At this university, if you looked around at the newly hired professors, you would find a clear pattern of young, handsome, foreign-born men, Asian, Arabian, Indian, African, some European, but very few Americans. And this proved to be the case. While some people might tell me, well, you didn't try hard enough, or you quit too soon, I can tell you that I've heard that trash before, and there's a time that comes around when you quit banging on closed doors and start looking for open doors. In other words, stop being stupid. Open up your mind and start looking outside the box. Well, this is my bailiwick. I've been an entrepreneur my whole life and also a teacher. But let's add in scientist, adventurer, discoverer, and inventor. When you look at this strange combination, there is no plan for this. This isn't a job. It's a lifestyle. But it makes sense that no one but me can direct me. One of my first engineering supervisors, when I was a new, young, straight out of college engineer, he said of me, in front of me, he said, "Bob Mertens does what Bob Mertens wants to do." And my jaw dropped. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I was completely shocked when he said this. It made no sense to me then, but it makes every bit of sense to me now. This is a pretty bad thing for a young engineer new out of college to hear. I remember a lot about that first engineering job, but I remember this most of all. It sank in, perhaps in the wrong way, but nonetheless. All of those engineering years, I was very self-directed, very independent. You just show me the ropes and I'll do the rest. That didn't sit well with many of my employers or supervisors who perhaps wanted a bit more control over me. But being self-directed, I also tended to be a bit more risk-taking. So this question I had during my doctoral education, who will hire me and what will they have me do, finally played itself out recently. You simply don't realize it until you get out there and experience it. I needed to pay off a debt related to one of my research activities, and I was willing to bring myself back down to technician level to do it. So I took my resume and I deleted 4 of my advanced degrees off it and applied for a technician job at a local company. I was called back in less than 2 days. What a shock. I took a 27-page curriculum vitae and trimmed it down to a 2-page resume, leaving in only my lowest college degree and my technician experience. But I neglected to reorder my professional references, who were all professors and deans. That didn't work out well. I showed up at the company for the interview, took their technician test, scored very high on it. They were impressed. Talked to the hiring supervisors and managers, and they said they would be in touch. 2 days later, they called me back and told me they found out about my Ph.D. I said, "Ah, crap." They laughed, and they said they would consider me anyway. And here's what happened. When they called up my references, you know that they all referred to me as Dr. Mertens. I was busted. A couple of days later, they called me back again and offered me the job at the pay level I had asked for. It took a while, but after some time, it became apparent that they thought of me as their Ph.D. technician, and they had no clue how to use me effectively. In some cases, they had me doing work that could be passed on to very low-level technicians, that is, technicians with high school-level skill set, not even technicians in the real sense of the word. At one point, they bragged to me that they had hired PhDs before who didn't even last a day. In other words, my worst PhD nightmare had come true. I was working for people who hadn't the first clue what I could do. It was worse than this, since some of the people were coming up to me and explaining, as though I were a child newly out of grammar school, how some things worked. Ironically, some of these explanations came from people who weren't even engineers. All of this made sense to me. The original owners of this company were PhDs, and they had made and built it into a profitable company. When the owners died, some sharks moved in and bought the company, presumably to break it up and sell it for parts. That didn't work out, so they went off and made some mistake that my managers had made. They hired a Ph.D. electrical engineer to CEO the company. Well, that was stupid. Once again, these people had no clue what a Ph.D. was for. The PhDs that ran this company didn't actually spend a lot of time running it. They hired people to do that. If they didn't, that's what I would do. Find solid, trustworthy individuals to run the company for you so that you could be freed up to expand your research and invent new components. But this was a young guy, and when they hired him, he also had no clue what he was supposed to do. So he didn't do research. He didn't create any new patents. He didn't hire a research team to come in and start building new teams. Instead, he played CEO. He did the job he was hired for. So that went sideways. Eventually, he quit. They fired me, and then I noticed that they've been buying patents, I assume, to help them stay competitive in the absence of a research department. I didn't feel too bad about being fired, and in fact, the day they did it, I sort of knew that's what was going on. To be fair, they had every excuse to fire me. I felt dirty the way I got the job by not including all of my degrees in my resume, as though I had lied by omission, of course. So I felt a bit dishonest about the whole thing. Usually when you go to a job interview with a PhD up front, you get treated a lot more respectfully than I did when I interviewed here. Also, there were other engineers around, but I was a technician, so they sort of looked down their noses at me, even though I could have been any one of their professors. It probably didn't help that I may have looked down my nose at them too. These were just kids with bachelor's degrees, some of them fresh out of college. I thought about doing a startup to buy this company and use it to solve one of those technological problems I have that can't seem to be solved. But it turns out they have all the equipment I need to do it. I could buy the company and then buy the equipment, but I would need a lot more investors. Alternatively, I could do a startup and not buy this company, but then I'd have to hire a bunch of all new employees, find a new building to work in, and so on. Better to buy up a company that's already established, has business relationships already going, and a market plan already in place. So that's where we are now. I'm looking at a startup. Either to build a business from scratch or to buy this one and turn it around a little bit. Stuck to butt. Thanks for watching my program.